Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times, a Prancing Pony podcast production. I'm the Man of the West. It's time to wrap up week 80 with Silmarillion Saturday. These Saturdays are our chance to revisit the history and legends of the Elder Days, sometimes from the Silmarillion, unfinished tales, sometimes something else entirely. Now, last week, we took a closer look in Of the Rings of Power in the Third Age at two of the Astari and their roles as the War of the Ring drew near. Today, we learn more about Dol Guldur, and Gandalf finally gets his way at the council. But ever the shadow in Mirkwood grew deeper, and to Dol Guldur evil things repaired out of all the dark places of the world, and they were united again under one will, and their malice was directed against the elves and the survivors of Númenor. Therefore, at last, the council was again summoned, and the lore of the rings was much debated. But Mithrandir spoke to the council, saying, "It is not needed that the ring should be found, for while it abides on earth and is not unmade, still the power that it holds will live, and Sauron will grow and have hope. The might of the elves and the elf friends is less now than of old. Soon he will be too strong for you, even without the great ring, for he rules the 9, and of the 7 he has recovered 3. We must strike." To this Curanir now assented, desiring that Sauron should be thrust from Dol Guldur, which was nigh to the river, and should have leisure to search there no longer. Therefore, for the last time he aided the council, and they put forth their strength, and they assailed Dol Guldur, and drove Sauron from his hold, and Mirkwood, for a brief while, was made wholesome again. But their stroke was too late, for the Dark Lord had foreseen it, and he had long prepared all his movements, and the Ulairi, his 9 servants, had gone before him to make ready for his coming. Therefore his flight was but a feint, and he soon returned, and ere the wise could prevent him, he re-entered his kingdom in Mordor, and reared once again the dark towers of Barad-dûr. And in that year the White Council met for the last time, and Curanir withdrew to Isengard, and took counsel with none save himself. Orcs were mustering, and far to the east and the south the wild peoples were arming. Then, in the midst of gathering fear and the rumor of war, the foreboding of Elrond was proved true, and the One Ring was indeed found again, by a chance more strange than even Mithrandir had foreseen, and it was hidden from Curanir and from Sauron. For it had been taken from Anduin long ere they sought for it, being found by one of the small fisher folk that dwelt by the river ere the kings failed in Gondor. And by its finder it was brought beyond search into dark hiding under the roots of the mountains. There it dwelt, until even in the year of the assault upon Dol Guldur, it was found again, by a wayfarer fleeing into the depths of the earth from the pursuit of the orcs, and passed into a far distant country, even to the land of the Periannath, the little people, the halflings, who dwelt in the west of Eriador. And ere that day they had been held of small account by elves and by men, and neither Sauron nor any of the wise save Mithrandir had in all their councils given thought to them. Now, by fortune and his vigilance, Mithrandir first learned of the ring, ere Sauron had news of it. Yet he was dismayed and in doubt, for too great was the evil power of this thing for any of the wise to wield, unless, like Curanir, he wished himself to become a tyrant and a dark lord in his turn. But neither could it be concealed from Sauron forever, nor could it be unmade by the craft of the elves. Therefore, with the help of the Dunedain of the north, Mithrandir set a watch upon the land of the Periannath and bided his time. But Sauron had many ears, and soon he heard rumor of the One Ring, which above all things he desired, and he sent forth the Nazgul to take it. Then war was kindled, and in battle with Sauron, the Third Age ended even as it had begun. Now we begin this passage with a reminder that the power of Sauron is far-reaching, and is drawing all evil to itself to use against the elves and the Dunedain, the same enemies who defeated him at the end of the Second Age. Man, this guy can hold a grudge. But when the White Council convenes to deal with it, Saruman doesn't consent to the attack because he sees danger to elves and men. He doesn't even agree to it because weakening Sauron would strengthen his own efforts, although it certainly would. He agrees because it will give him more time to search the area of the Gladden Fields on his own and prevent Sauron from doing the same. And by the way, that search, as we'll find out some other time, bears at least some fruit for Saruman. But they're not facing off against a rookie here. This isn't Sauron's first time facing off against the good guys. It's been a long time since he's been a lieutenant. He knew this was coming, and he'd already sent his ringwraiths back to Mordor to pick out the furniture and get the pantry stocked. So what does Saruman do? He abandons the White Council and goes solo. We get an incredible summary of the history of the ring, from Smeagol finding it to Bilbo bringing it back to the Shire, along with a reminder that only Gandalf had even bothered to consider the hobbits in all of their dealings. Good thing Gandalf did, or somebody else might have gotten word first. And then the reading ends with what we know from both the beginning of The Lord of the Rings and from the story The Hunt for the Ring in the Unfinished Tales. Now that might be a fun one to look at someday on a series of Third Age Thursdays. For now, though, folks, that does it for this week's Silmarillion and for Week 80. Thank you for joining me, and please come back next week as we conclude the Third Age, Sam gets overlooked, and the rings sail west. Please visit patreon.com/TolkienTimes to learn how you can get an ad-free feed, bonus episodes, and become a part of my content council. Podcast listeners, be sure to subscribe to the show in your podcast apps. On YouTube, subscribe to this channel to get all of the PPP productions. And be sure you're following @PrancingPonyPod on all your social media. Finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.